Mani Padme Hum.
Religion, science, myths, and legends all point toward the next evolution in human consciousness. What do the invisible realms hold? Who's telling us and how do they know? We're investigating insights from around the world to answer the question, what does the material world arise out of and where do we go once we've dropped the body? You're about to go interdimension with Robert Wallace and Adam Jeffery to undiscovered spiritual realities.
My own brother, sister. Yes.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God?
No, I do not.
Stay tuned to find out why you shouldn't be taking oaths, even in court.
Then, I've never seen a righteous man or a son begging for bread. We're talking generational cursings and blessings.
Also, are you forgiving others the way you have been forgiven? No? All right then, pack your bags, you're going to jail.
Then, you are God's. Uh-oh, you didn't know? What? Okay, hang in there.
And the pros and cons of the New Age movement.
New Age. All right, welcome to Spiritual Realities. I'm Robert Wallace. This is Adam Jeffery. We're gonna cut through the small talk because we got some delicious things to dish on. Today, we're gonna have a little bit of a deja vu. If you remember back a few episodes ago, feels like years ago, we removed the hat from Adam, which is a little bit of Bible riddles.
Yes.
The whole praying without ceasing and then shaming the head while you're praying thing. You can't have it both ways, folks. But this is sort of the same thing because we're talking about oaths. So you go into court, they say, sir, I need you to put your hand on the Bible, raise your other hand, and repeat after me. I solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God. Now here's the problem with that. The Bible is very clear that not a single hair in our head is ours. We can't turn it gray. We can't make ourselves a cubit taller. He said, let your yes be yes and your no be no. Anything more is from the evil one. You're telling me when we go into court every time, they're making me conjure up the evil one?
Wow.
In order to, like, prove my innocence or something? Whatever the case may be.
Yeah, and it was Jesus that said that specifically in the Bible.
Himself.
Yeah.
And yet, and the irony is, the courts are bringing in the Bible.
Right.
And making people swear in the very book that says, don't do it. So, I don't know, folks. If I was you, I'd be taking some of these old-fashioned beliefs and bringing them back, because there's a reason why they were said to begin with. And, you know, from a spiritual perspective, like, our word is our bond.
Right.
We bind ourselves by the promises and the oaths that we make.
Yeah.
They carry with us into the future. The Scientologists take it to another level. You know, they have those billion-year contracts. So they're like, for the next billion years, all your reincarnation cycles are owned by L. Ron Hubbard.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Ah.
And Eastern mysticism, you know, you'll have clairvoyance and people who can look at a person and see how they're like bound by spiritual binds from obligations, curses that have been put on them. And they actually have to go through and break these binds that are keeping people sick and things like that.
Wow.
And putting yourself under oath, that's the same sort of scenario.
Yeah. So how do you think that applies to oaths outside of the court?
I think it's a good question. I think it goes for everything.
Yeah.
And if any of you are judges out there or members of the legal community, feel free to call in and give us your 2 cents. I think, you know, it's obvious what a person's trying to accomplish by making somebody swear an oath. They want them to, you know, say something out of truth from their deepest core. Now, if a person doesn't believe in God, for instance, in Freemasonry, when somebody takes their oath to Masonry, they'll actually say, you have to believe in a God, because how can you swear an oath on a Bible or whatever
Right.
that you don't believe in? So if you're Hindu, they'll replace that Bible with the Bhagavad Gita, which
Yeah.
we'll talk about later, because our friend Adam here took the whole week and read that book, so we're going to get some juice out of that.
Yeah.
Or if you're Islamic, you'll put the Quran down or whatever and swear blasphemy on that. Isn't it a blasphemy to do that which you're not supposed to do on the very thing that is the most sacred?
Seems like it to me.
All right. Well, I just want to cover that.
Yeah.
So, again, let your yes be yes and your no be no. So when they ask you, say, Judge, I'll tell you yes or I'll tell you no. Anything more is from the devil. Okay.
You know, and it just seems practical too. If you're a person of your word, I mean, if you're honest, then all you should have to say is yes. You shouldn't be having to prove anything to anyone.
Absolutely.
And so you can see how that comes from the evil one, because at that point it's like, oh, I have to promise you because you don't trust me.
Yeah.
Because I don't usually tell the truth.
Yeah, exactly.
You know.
People will say, well, honestly,
right,
or to tell you the truth,
yeah,
or I swear, you got to believe me.
Yeah.
Those sorts of things usually come, right before or right after somebody is told something not completely true.
Correct.
Because they need reinforcement because, it's just not self-evidently true.
Right. And or they're just not trustworthy in general.
They're not
it's a known thing. Hey, that guy, he tells the truth maybe half the time.
And they need to solicit a little bit of your graces to believe them through the smile.
Right.
Okay, well, that's good. Another question on today's docket we need to discuss is, the Bible says, I've never seen, and I believe this is it's either Psalms or it's Proverbs, sorry. It says, I've never seen a righteous man or his son begging for bread on the side of the road. It made me wonder, because I have to blow this out and say, are you telling me that righteous people don't become impoverished and aren't begging for bread? Because a lot of times we're taught, the poor, will inherit the kingdom of God.
Right.
And so I'm sitting here thinking, well, there's got to be a lot of, righteous, blessed people, on the side of the street. And of course, whether or not their karma has put them there, we all have a responsibility in a communal way to help lift each other out of the karma that we're suffering. So maybe I'm homeless because I made bad choices, I was an alcoholic, or I didn't, do good, with my family and responsibilities. That may all be, but that gives nobody the right to turn their nose up at this person or to say they're getting what they deserve.
Right.
They are in our midst, and in that way they become part of our karma to help them handle their karma.
Absolutely.
They're suffering whether or not you hand them a little bit of something or not.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, as far as generational cursings and blessings, spare the rod, spoil the child. This is kind of on like the first level before we start working out to bigger generations, that the kid will thank you for disciplining them. If you spare the child the rod, they're going to grow up corrupt. If I'm not saying that we need to beat our children, but I'm saying we need discipline. Because you can make important corrective measures, you can change their trajectory while they're young by bringing them up on important issues so that they, certain ideas don't even enter into their mind that they can get away in life operating in these ways. And once they start to normalize and everything, they'll be happy that, they're not relying on these, half-baked ideas that undisciplined parents, might have let them get away with. It's kind of long-winded, but you know what I'm saying. And then there's the blessings of your forefathers on us. I was listening to Joe Osteen the other day, and he was talking about how he was reaping the harvest of his dad and his forefathers' efforts in creating their church. And, they were making sacrifices that wouldn't, until later, be reaped by younger generations. I think, especially in America, in this day and age, especially when, I scarcely know who my great-grandmother is, unlike in other cultures and traditions where they can name their lineage going back to so-and-so.
Right.
It gets harder and harder to try to incorporate what was happening 100 years ago to what's happening in my life now, or to think that there's any connection between me and my forefathers. That's kind of like an old traditional thing. Though there is something I could say to that. Steiner talks about, talking about Rudolf Steiner here, he talks about it used to be thousands of years ago that a person would retain the memory of his forefathers. So that means you would remember your dad's life as though it were your own. And in the same way that we remember what happened to us a few years ago, you would actually share the memory from your forefathers.
Wow.
And then, but something happens in that stream of consciousness that comes from the early forefathers, especially when our blood is mixed with other races. So I'm half Mexican. So my Mexican side is pretty Mexican. My white side is pretty just Norwegian and Welsh and Scottish and European in nature. And Steiner says that if we grow up, for instance, let's say you're Indian and you've only had Indian ancestors, you're going to have, whether you realize it or not, a lot of ancestral memory in you. But as soon as a child comes out, born out of two different races, all of a sudden that ancestral memory goes away, and the person then develops an intellectual mind. They start to think with their intellect in a way they couldn't before. So there's actually a development that happens in the mixing of races, and that ancestral lineages die and new intellectual capacities come out of these half-breed people, if you want to call them.
Interesting.
Cher said half-breed. I can say half-breed.
Wait, who said it?
Cher.
Cher.
She had
Okay.
that song.
Yeah,
I don't know why she's allowed to make the rule, but it just came into my head. So there's that. So the blessings and the cursings of people who are suffering on the side of the road. Does that mean that? What does that mean to you? Because it does say that I've never seen a righteous man or a son begging.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that I'm going to look at everybody on the side of the road and say, they have it coming. I mean, Jesus said, blessed are the poor.
Right.
I think one of the things that comes to mind too, before I let you contribute something of value here.
Sure, yeah.
Is that, and I don't remember where I heard this, but it was talking about, when we have money, then our reliance and our faith are on the things of money and what we have.
Right.
That we don't need to, look to God for our sustenance because we got money. We can take care of it ourselves. But when you're poor, you truly know what it is to trust in God to provide every meal, every little thing that you need to get your car up the hill, these sorts of struggles. So these people are really in touch, with the Spirit of God because, the love of money comes between God and most people.
Right.
So there is an advantage there.
Absolutely. There's a lot going on here. First of all, I think anything that you find in the Bible or anywhere that you could claim is true also needs to be balanced with do not judge. So it's like, okay, so you find this thing and you say, well, in any case, it's not my place to judge. Either way, righteous or not righteous. Yes. Poor or rich. It's not, it's not my, this is my brother or sister. And so you get back to unity consciousness also, it's like we are the body of Christ, we are one. So you get back into this unity idea. But also I find it interesting that Jesus seems to flip this whole idea consistently. Not only blessed are the poor, but over and over again, whatever you've done to the least of these, you've done it unto me. So when we encounter somebody who's begging or somebody who is poor, these encounters are with Christ. That's the way we should see it. We shouldn't see it, again, not only should we not judge, that's basic, but in addition, a more advanced outlook is I'm actually having an encounter with the living Christ right now.
That's right.
That's how sacred this moment is.
Absolutely. And that is so important that you said that, because we look at people and we literally take them at face value. We judge the books by the covers.
Yeah.
And in reality, the true person isn't visible. The true person is invisible. The soul itself is a rarefied, misty, gaseous sort of form. This is a crystallized body, and we've taken possession of it. Aspects of our personality come out in our features and in our health and things like that. But we are not these bodies. We're actually all vessels or temples of God.
Right.
And so the Christ, which whether or not it has woken up and risen out of the soul of the person or not, it's still inside of the person.
Absolutely.
And so when Judgment Day comes about and we see things for how it is, and we realize that these people that we were scolding or that we were berating or judging, that they were all the same, just as much Jesus and our Lord and as those who found it in their higher selves, who've been able to strip away the personality and all these things that make that hard to see. So even if somebody's going around with a scowl and they themselves are judgmental and bitter and all that, we can't forget that all that is covering up a pure spark of God.
Absolutely.
And the more they clean house, the more that's going to shine through.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, you could have a dirty clam or oyster and you could throw it away because it doesn't look good on the surface. There can't be anything good in there.
Right.
But there's a pearl in there. All right. So be nice to each other.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
Every day.
Yeah.
The next thing, and this goes back to the parable I think Jesus told. He was talking about. You got something, Dee?
Yes, I have a question.
Yes.
I started asking earlier, but I was like, no, well, I'm asking now. When you said that when two people of different races have a child and they have the intellectual mindset, why is that? Is it because they come from different cultures and they have a different outlook on what their reality is?
So my understanding from Steiner is this: since the pure races, if you've been all Indian or all African American or all white, you're actually carrying with you ancestral and race memory, history, knowledge that's intuitive. But when the two races mix, those lines of knowledge and intuition, they're severed, and intellect is born out of this person. Mm-hmm. Now, instead of just knowing things or operating more or less mechanically or operating from some unknown knowledge that they've inherited, now all of a sudden they think deeper on things. Now we have a generation of people of mixed races, and what we find is that these people are thinking differently. They're bringing up new ways of doing things. They're trying to break the mold. They're seeing in this new sort of, broader perspective. It's more holistic. It's more unifying, and so anyway, that's basically what it is. We just like expand and we become more independent in our thought life.
Oh, okay.
As a result of, So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I feel that way. I mean, myself, like I said, I'm half Mexican, and so, I feel like aside of being a little bit different, I look completely Caucasian. So it's not like I suffered, persecution or anything like that. My dad's side just speaks Spanish and stuff like that,
Yeah.
But so there's two different kinds of heritages, and I feel like I felt somewhere in between. I feel like a citizen of the world.
Absolutely.
And I feel like that's kind of what this leads to, is being more of a universal kind of citizen.
Yeah, I think that's kind of cool because you can see just from what you just said that it can be liberating, honestly, because it liberates people from the idea that they have to be stuck in a particular category.
Yeah.
No matter what that category is. And it's not that category is necessarily a bad thing, but you also have the freedom to be a citizen of the world, like you just said. It's like I see myself as that. And this, it's also it's essentially, to me, it seems a little bit like ego death and self-realization. The idea that I am still this guy that you see, Adam Jeffery, but I'm also becoming unified with the truer self. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it's like that's a liberating thing also.
Yeah. That just reminded me of the earthly qualities that make up man and the heavenly qualities that make up man. We're built up out of the mineral. We're built up then out of the plants, which plants get their sustenance out of the minerals. Then above that is animals. And then from there, the mantle of God, the Spirit of God came down and created a human being. So the lower part of our nature that comes out of the earth as the minerals, plants, and animals gives us this form that we enjoy. And it's the divine part that brings higher thinking, morality, that brings intelligence, consciousness, and the possibility of transcending into other dimensions. So I forget why I said that, but it's all connected. Okay.
It is. It's good. It's
I
good.
had a reason. We'll listen back and figure it out. So, back to what I was talking about. Jesus said, he was telling this parable about this guy who owed this other guy a bunch of money. And the guy who owed the money went to the other guy begging for mercy. Don't throw me in jail. Don't ruin my life. And this guy to whom the money was owed had great compassion and empathy and mercy. And he said, you know what? I'm going to forgive your debt. I'm not going to send you to jail. I'm going to forgive the money that you owe. and set you free. And so this is like, oh, great. It's a beautiful lesson of compassion and action. Okay, great. Well, what did this guy go and do, though? He had money owed to him.
Right.
And instead of spreading that mercy, as he was just shown, he went to collect that money, and very violently.
Yeah.
He was grabbing him by, the collar. He was threatening him to throw him in jail. He was hurling insults and very dirty with him. And the original guy who was owed the money, who had forgiven this man his debt, found out about it. And he said, bring that guy to me. And he was brought before him, and he said, I forgave you your debt. And as soon as I let you go, you went and collected, very violently, you went and collected from all these other people ruthlessly.
Yeah.
I remember that story. That was in the Bible, right?
That was.
Yeah.
I do remember that story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's like, you should have shown the same compassion I showed you.
Exactly.
And then he said, now I'm going to put you in jail until you pay every last cent that you owe. And obviously, this is telling us Jesus, God, forgave us of our sins. He forgave us of our shortcomings. He forgave us of the awkwardness the other day. He forgave us of the debt we owed the guy, and then everything, fell away. And you know what? There's going to be people who are going to do awkward things in front of us. They're going to owe us something. They're going to have their shortcomings. And if you can't just operate on the basis of love and mercy, the way that God has showed it to you, what's going to happen? Judgment Day is going to roll around, and you're going to pay everything that you did or you didn't do. He's going to say, I forgave you of your sins. And what did you do? You went and you ruthlessly collected from other people. You didn't show compassion. So instead of entering into the joy of your Father, you're going to reap the fruits of your non-forgiveness. You're going to pay the debt.
Yeah. I feel like we see that theme overall in the New Testament over and over again. Jesus teaches it over and over again alone, but you see it throughout. We love because we were first loved. Judge not lest you be judged. Forgive as you have been forgiven. It's taught in this parable and in other parables. It's said very directly over and over again. And again, we're looking at something like karma, if not actually karma itself. It's like what you do to others will be done to you. So judge not unless you'll be judged in the same way.
Yeah.
Forgive others. I mean, even what we call the Lord's Prayer, forgive our debts as we forgive our debtors. Again, over and over, you can just see the same cycle being taught and being lived. So I think that it's super important that we realize that what we do to others is what will be done to us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it won't be comfortable. It won't be a happy thing. I think in the past, I'm going to segue a little bit, because in the past we've talked about hell a little bit. And the more you think about it and the more information I collect on it, there's a lot of different angles to it. And I think the first thing to remember is because, we've talked about, the nature of a forgiving God to handle the sinners in a way that excludes, an everlasting torment in the typical way. But I think we forget some of the things that precede these sorts of things. For instance, when you die, you see your whole life flash before you. You see this tableau, or you see this big old stretch of everything you've ever done in one foul swoop. Then there's a segment, according to Steiner, called Kamaloka. Okay. This is a stage where we go through our entire life backward at a much faster pace, and we experience our life as we cause others to experience us. So if we slapping people around at some point, as we go back to our timeline, we'll experience those slaps and pains, and we'll decide whether we need to come back and make it right. Or if we've been loving and kind to people, we're going to experience all the joy and love that we gave to other people. And that's really great. Then there's something called the fire of purification, which is also known as purgatory. And in this stage of dropping the body and going back into the spirit world, we're trying to disconnect from the physical. We're trying to disconnect from the ethereal body. We're trying to disconnect from the astral body, or the soul. And then, so we're left with that one spark of light, the spirit, which we can then enter into and through into the kingdom of heaven, into the spiritual plane. So what the fire of purification is throughout life, you've found your favorite foods. For me, that's pasta. Okay. The food that you salivate when you think about. You got your favorite activities. You get an adrenaline rush when you go mountain climbing. or the favorite things that you like to do. Well, now when you're between lives, you don't have a body with the five senses. You can't look upon those things you desire to look upon. You can't taste those things and consume them that you desire to consume because you don't have the faculties of digestion. Okay?
Yeah.
You can't handle these things. So what a person is left with is, according to Steiner, a sense of being thirsty in the desert. You're craving something. The desire, though, it gets so fiery, it burns the person up. They feel like they're being burnt in a fire of desire. And that fire of purification is burning away as we accept that those things are gone, that we have to let them be. They're transient. They're not what we're about. And those were unhealthy loves. That fire purges and burns away all of this earth stuff so that we can be just spirit and we can carry on into the spirit world. And then we still have a judgment. Like, how can you go to heaven or hell unless you've been judged for heaven and hell? So what about this judgment? Swedenborg talks about how we're moved into the communities of heaven and hell after judgment. So we're moved into the communities of people in heaven who like to stitch. You know, their 7 mesh plastic canvas and make coasters or whatever their love is. And I say it that way because Swedenborg talks about how there's just thousands, millions of communities of people with very unique, diverse interests and loves. And you're going to be put into that unique category where you find your kinship with people that, you know, maybe you've never seen.
Yes, I have a childhood story. My dad, he used to tell me you have to do good in school and do your homework and pray to God so you can go to heaven and eat popcorn because I love popcorn. He said there's going to be popcorn in heaven.
Oh, I love that. That's cool.
Yeah, that's something Swedenborg and Steiner talk about, is there is consuming in heaven. There is a feast, you know?
Yeah.
So, you know, there's
You see that in the Bible, too. A lot of the different parables talk about a feast, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, a wedding feast, you see analogies of, like, it being like a wedding, a party, you know? So I definitely think,
special order for Delois. We have some popcorn here.
We're going to have popcorn and pasta.
Popcorn with butter, yes.
Yeah. Chocolate
for you.
Any
have
kind of
some
chocolate or
there.
just chocolate?
I've been dipping all kinds of fruit and chocolate lately. Maybe
Oh, have you?
marshmallows.
Oh, well, I mean, for me, it's vegan chocolate. She asked if there was any particular kind of chocolate. For me, it's vegan chocolate, which is really good, by the way, which is
That
really
sounds
good.
good. I haven't even
I might
had
take
it
a look
before.
at that.
Oh, it's so good.
Do you sell that at your restaurant?
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. We have cakes and all kinds of things.
That sounds so good. I
Pretty
have
awesome.
to come one day. I really do.
You really do.
So, great. Well, basically, that's what it comes down to: treating others, forgiving them of their karma, forgiving them as we have been forgiven.
Yeah.
Okay, that's pretty good. The next thing that we have to talk about is there's a lot of retreats happening. There's a lot of different kinds of meditation. People are doing crazy stuff. You know, people are out there, and I say crazy in a good way because I'm part of these people. Everything I'm about to tell you, I think, is a good idea, by the way. So one of the things that are happening are these silent retreats. Silent retreats. Somebody will go out with a group of people into a house for a solid week and nobody says a word. That seems like it could be very beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
I could use a silent hour in my life. We'll see how I do. That's where a lot of meditation, you know, if you want to stop the thinking, you know, stop the talking and then go from there. But usually we're talking a lot because we're thinking too much. And the other thing that's happening is people are doing these dark retreats where they sit in the dark for like a week or so. And what that's supposed to do is, or it does for some, is it causes them to see into the astral light. They start to develop clairvoyance because this light, which exists in the eyeball of every person, which the light of the life of the soul is in the eye.
Yeah.
Okay. And if thine eye be single, it'll light up the whole world. And so there is actually, if you close your eyes, except for you driving right now, unless you're at a stoplight, and you close your eyes, kind of close them, and then you touch with your fingertips the outer periphery, the left and right outer sides of the left and right eyeball, and you just kind of tap, you're going to notice some kind of a luminous activity. And this bioluminescence is the substance of astrolight. And in fact, if you become acquainted with this light and you begin to meditate and put your attention on that very specific spectrum of light coming from the eyeballs, you'll see that it veils and shrouds living beings living in astral light. And that it isn't some just random side phenomena occurring, a biological quirk or something in the body,
Right.
but it's actually one of the faculties of sight, future faculties of sight. It's not vestigial. It's latent, waiting to be discovered. You know, and future generations will learn about these things in us that they used to know that we've forgotten in our materialism. But
is this related to what's known as the third eye? You know,
absolutely,
the third eye chakra.
This is third eye activity.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah,
you know?
probably should have said that.
No,
Just two eyes coming together to be one.
to be the one. Yeah.
And just, you know, focusing. Again, if you do like a meditation where you close your eyes and you touch the outer and you see these lights coming in and you can really focus on letting it light up your whole interior world, you will start to see geometric patterns. You'll start to see divine imagery. It doesn't come out of a hallucination. It doesn't come out of brain cells being pressed too closely together. You'll start to see a reality that lives within that spectrum of light, which is right under all of our noses. It just requires a little bit of investigation and practice.
I've got another question about these dark retreats. Have you heard about the ones that people do? I can't remember exactly what they're calling it, but they're floating in the dark.
I was just going to say that. I've done that before.
You've done that. Okay, cool.
Yeah. And
I should have known that you have.
So we're talking about...
You float in the dark?
Yes. So this is called a sensory deprivation tank.
That's it, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're floating in, it's basically like a pod, like this, you know, this tank thing that's covered and makes it dark. It's filled with water with a ton of salt in it. Very salty.
Oh,
So it's
okay.
like at the Dead Sea. If you've ever gone to the Dead Sea and floated in the Dead Sea, you know you're super buoyant because of the salt density. Well, that's what happens in these sensory deprivation tanks. So that way you're floating in this warm water, which is body temperature, and you hear really no sounds except for the occasional slushing around of water, which kind of echoes around in there. And the idea is, and this happens to many different kinds of people, they go into spiritual vision. So in the process, they shut down their brain, they're silent still enough where the spirit can move through them, and they become so relaxed they have spiritual visions.
Is the salt more like a cleansing, or is that just to help you float?
You know, I'm not sure if it's an Epsom. It's there for flotation purposes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I know salt can cleanse.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt that there's cleansing properties either, but
Okay.
I'm not an expert in this matter.
Where did you have this experience? Because I know that like down here in the South, that's not.
I did this in Dallas probably 4 years ago at a place called Aqua.
Okay.
And so there was like 2 of these float tank places.
Yeah.
And I haven't done it since. But, you know, the idea is people will get memberships and, you know, they'll come and do it routinely. And then I never did it routinely. I can't even remember if I did it more than once. I did it once or twice only. But the idea is you'll do it regularly, like spa visits or, you know, I don't know, you know, I say go for it.
Absolutely.
Doesn't hurt nothing. And the other thing along these lines, you know, and then there's breatharian retreats, which, you know, I did a online breatharian retreat where I did Akai and Camille's 8-day process. They're breatharians. And so for 8 days now, you can go on site with these people. And what a breatharian is, in case you don't know, these are people who don't eat or drink food or water. And they survive off pranic breathing. That's the pranic spiritual energy that's in the sunlight. And that is infused in all of your water and all your food. And you're wringing it out. It's like trying to get the essential oils out of something. You're eating this big old piece of pie for just a little bit of prana. And you're surviving off this little bit of prana that you're wringing out of the foods. But if you do pranic breathing, you get really stockpiled on there.
Yeah.
And in the process of fasting, you actually lose your ability to experience hunger.
And they say vegans are intense.
That's, you know, and here I am, you know, I'm kind of in an intermediary stage. I'm getting ready to do the 8-day process all over again. And then when I come out of it, I'm going to be straight up, this is my plan, being straight up fruitarian, overlapping breatharian.
Wow.
So my adjustment, I'm going to go ahead and just skip the vegan. I'm going to skip the nutarian, and I'm just going to go right to the fruits. And I think it's actually, that's not that hard to imagine. If you've ever fasted, you know that even a scrawny old piece of rice begins to look like a turkey dinner. Because,
right.
If, you're having these cravings for things, all of a sudden, everything looks delicious.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to make sure I put all the focus on fruits. And I learned to love the fruits.
There you go.
I learned to love V8 juice.
Cool.
Through fasting back in the day, I can learn to love fruits. So, okay. So there, we've hit the top 10 things. But let's get on to the accomplishment of the hour. Adam has read the Bhagavad Gita this week. Tell us about the sublime poetry of Krishna.
Well, I found it beautiful. I couldn't stop reading it, and I had a lot of time since I was, had a back injury this week, so I had some time, and I wanted to do it. And I have read parts of the Bhagavad Gita before, but I've never read the entire story front to back, and I just couldn't stop, and I am so glad that I did. It's really cool because what I wanted to get out of it and what I did was to see the parallels between the things that I am more familiar with, which is, I have a degree in the Bible and in theology, and obviously the links are there. And in fact, I was reading it sometimes going, this, because I'm listening to Krishna. This is Krishna teaching Arjuna, and I'm listening to Krishna teaching all this wisdom, and I go, this is Jesus. I mean, they're saying exactly the same things, sometimes exactly, except that, we hear Jesus say, I'm the Alpha and the Omega. Well, that's the Greek letters of the alphabet, so Krishna wasn't using Greek, so he would say, I am the beginning and the end. And I go, he's saying exactly the same thing as Jesus, and a lot of times it was the same thing over and over. I'm also a big etymology guy. I love words and finding out where the words came from, and what they meant before we made them mean what they mean now, and that kind of thing. And so I did a little bit of research on Krishna's title, Krishna's name, and the Sanskrit is where his name comes from. And some say that you could change that into English more correctly by saying Krista.
I was just gonna say that.
Yeah.
Krishna, Christ. Yeah.
Yeah, and so Jesus's title, it's not his name, but his title, Christ, comes from the Greek word Christos. So you have Christa in Sanskrit, and you have Christos
in
Greek.
Deal.
They're the same. So what you see is what we call the Christ. Again, this universal consciousness, the universal Christ that transcends religion, speaking through what we've come to know as Krishna.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Taking on bodily form as these avatars.
Correct.
Same spiritual being coming down to different generations and epochs. And teaching the message that they need to hear right then.
Right, and he said that he would. Krishna said, "I'll be back every what was it? Every millennium, every 1,000 years."
Yeah.
Because the people in different generations, in different places, in different times need to hear this message again.
Yes.
So he said it. He said, "I'll be back," and there he is again and again.
Yeah, that is absolutely true.
It's pretty mind-boggling.
Yeah, it is. I'm gonna relate a story some of our listeners may find unbelievable, but that's what the show's all about, the unbelievable. So several years back, I was sleeping, and then I went into a vision dream, and in this dream, I was going to my friend's house, and I knocked on the door, and I went inside, and the whole thing took place. Have I told the story?
No.
Okay. And the whole thing took place in this guy's, receiving room, right at the door, where it's called, and foyer or whatever. And so then as I'm coming in, my friend says, "Oh, I invited blah 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 over." I don't know who he said. It was like Charlie Brown's teacher. And all I know is that in that vision, in that place time, I felt like I knew the person, and I did not want to be there for that. And I said, "Oh, so you had to invite him over?" It's like, okay, well, I'm gonna get going. I'll come over when he's gone. Okay. I don't know why I was thinking this. I don't even remember who I thought he was. I just was somebody that I didn't like. Okay, this is what's happening. And then all of a sudden, as I'm reaching for the handle to leave before he gets there, somebody knocks on the door. It's him. Okay, so I open up the door, and here's this guy. He's basically homeless looking. He's in not clean clothes. He looks, He's been through the roughs. And so, he comes in, and I don't want to be rude. So, I'm going to say goodbye. Like, I was just leaving anyway, real quick. And he begins to talk to me. And he starts talking and talking and talking. And before I know it, he says, well, I guess that's enough. I better get out of here. I don't want to overstay my welcome. Now, what he had been talking about was deep universal truths. He launched in the most sublime way into a conversation, speaking on the highest level, and I had just been listening to God. And so I said to myself, I started to cry immediately as I snapped out of it, and I realized that he's saying that he's got to go, because I just gone from not wanting to see this person to like, this person's God. And I said, my God, like you're God. Like, and all of a sudden he just smiles, and then he turns around, and then he turns back to me, and he's Krishna.
Wow.
Completely robed in his rich, elegant, his blue guy.
Yeah.
He's standing there. And I'm just like, whoa. And so that night I became a hard and fast believer in Krishna. It was a firsthand experience. And I learned a lot through it. And anytime I think about it to any depth, I start to cry, because it was a very meaningful experience. I can't remember hardly anything he said, because the words, how the scriptures say God's ways are so high above ours. I mean, there were such high concepts and everything, I could barely contain them in my little material brain coming back, Sure. All I know is it was just so awesome. And I just remember listening. Oh, wow. So anyway, that's my Krishna story.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
So beautiful.
And that's why I believe in Krishna. But if you just, study comparative religion, I know we're talking to people out here who are conservative Christians. They grew up in a one-way sort of attitude about spirituality, about religion. They're thinking that if they pick up the wrong book, if they look on any religion outside of Christianity with any kind of favor, then they've turned their back on God or something like that. And at the same time, I don't think we're realizing that we're turning ourselves into narrow-minded people. We think we're doing the right thing by turning away every other faith that isn't the one we grew up with, but we fail to see that God is in all faiths.
Right.
He's been trying to talk to people in different ways through their different leaderships. They're going through different circumstances. They need different rules to apply to where they're at. And instead, we're using this as like a mode of prejudice. We're saying, you are of a different religion, a different faith. Your God and my God are incompatible. And we don't see ourselves as universal beings sharing the universe together. There's one truth.
Right.
And again, all the books of the world, we could fill up the whole world with the books of what Jesus did, of what he said, and throughout time. We don't know everything. And I think the more I study all the other religions, the more I find that God is everywhere.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's good.
And I think that we have to keep that idea of being focused on truth where we find it too. It's like, if we're searching for the truth, Jesus said the truth will set you free. So if we get this closed-minded idea that we have what the truth is figured out, that becomes actually sort of a prison. It's actually the opposite of being set free. But if we're open to the truth, I think that's been the key for me, because I remember being kind of locked in that cell, and I didn't realize it. I thought I knew the truth and that truth was setting me free. I believed that at one period of my life. And then what I kind of did was I opened up and said, wait a minute, what if there's more than this truth? What if there's more truth to know? And as I've opened myself to truth, then I've been more and more set free. So it's interesting, because what I thought that I knew about Jesus was actually imprisoning me. But what I've come to know about truth is the truth does set you free. And the more open we become to it, the more free and liberated we are.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think this is a good segue to our next and final subject, and that's the pros and cons of the New Age movement. Where are we getting soft? Where have we progressed? I think early in my church journeys, if however many letter word this is, it wasn't a good word. The New Age is considered,
right.
you're pagan, witchcraft, doing this thing, that. And of course, going to these conservative churches, I didn't know any better. I didn't know what New Age was. I just saw psychics, and then I saw, people doing, weird things or seances, and they were always depicted in these lights, the occult or whatever. And it was always in this dark light that these things are explained. And then, and I was a Seventh-day Adventist at that time. So I grew up Catholic, and I was Baptist and Methodist, and I was going to Pentecostal churches, and then I went to a Seventh-day Adventist church, and, and I've been part of many other different kinds of religions. But at that time, a Seventh-day Adventist, they're very, very conservative.
Yeah.
And something like this, I had an old lady in my church, she told me, she's like, oh, you don't want to get into all that stuff with the secret. You're going to get into the occult, just like my grandson. Now, that was 15 years ago, and I said, Arlene, come on. Well, she was right. But what she and I didn't know at the time is that this stuff that we were fearing I would get into is not only not bad, it's super holy, and not only is it not a distraction, it's the inevitable next steps of a truly heartfelt spiritual journey that you come into this information, that you explore what isn't common in the churches. Because what's common in the churches right now, you see what it gets you. People go to church and they come back unchanged. They hear the scriptures, but the application isn't made deep enough. The study into these subjects, we don't want to get too deep. We're afraid of getting into uncharted territories, things that our preachers don't know about, and being lost, Instead of picking ourselves up by our own bootstraps, taking accountability for our own thinking, learning as only we can, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling.
Yeah.
Don't wait for the preacher's message to deliver you.
Right.
Go rogue and find out what they don't want you to know.
There you go. I want to add to that with care. I want to be careful as I say this, because I have a tendency now, coming from where I came from and where I'm at now, one of the things that I have to work on is to not be judgmental towards the churches, towards fundamentalism, towards what I've come from. That's my biggest work probably right now on a personal level, is to not become judgmental of where I've been. But at the same time, I do observe that something's happening in our society. There are people that are stuck in the churches and in this closed-minded way of thinking, but there are also people by the hundreds, maybe thousands across the country and the world that are leaving the churches. They're running away screaming, and there's a reason for that, and again, I'm saying this as an observation, not as a judgment. And I think that it's because a lot of people know that there's more truth than what's being presented there, and they do feel stuck, and they do feel like there's more, again, that the truth can set them free. Well, this doesn't feel like freedom. If Jesus says the truth can set me free, I believe Jesus. So what is this truth that can set me free? So I think it's why we're seeing a lot of, people are talking about the church is dying, the church is dying. I don't think that that's true on the universal level, the universal Christ, the body of Christ, that transcends what we call the church, the buildings in these places. But I see it as true for the buildings and the places where people are feeling stuck. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I feel basically that society as a whole is moving more towards, in their liberal nature, they're a more inclusive perspective. Right. And I think Jesus was a more inclusive, broader thinker.
Absolutely.
I think the irony here is that we have secular society almost progressing further along in the spiritual path in some ways than the spiritualists or the religious among us who have Christ's teachings on love one another as you love yourself. And so, when we hear people in the churches still going and, coming down on, certain people of certain demographics, whether they're gay or whether they're, immigrants of one kind, it's funny, we got Republicans tend to be more conservative, tend to be more Christian. Yeah. And then yet we still have issues of immigration and things like that, where we're thinking through economics and not through our spiritual mind.
Man, absolutely.
You want to vote your conscience?
Thank you for saying that, by the way.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And so that's kind of the irony, is that our ancient teachings are being almost because we're not developing and we're not expanding on the teachings of Christ, they're being outmoded by people who don't have time to wait for the old Christian churches to come up to times and learn how to, love and respect each person.
Yeah.
So that's what I think. And that's
Yeah.
why they're leaving. And that's why people want truer expressions of spirituality.
Yeah.
That's why the New Age movement's growing. That's why people are going to different spiritual teachers, because they're giving a live expression of what the Spirit is saying to the world.
Yeah.
And that's to love each other and to forgive one another and love yourself. And I mean, that really, it's like, if kindness is the big thing that it really boils down to, that's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
When I'm studying these religions, I'm really studying with an eye towards the silver bullet. What's the one thing that they say to do?
Yeah.
The Bible says, seek ye first the kingdom of God.
Yep.
And the law and the prophets are fulfilled in this, that you love God and do unto others, or love your neighbor as yourself.
Yeah.
Okay, that's something very simple. You don't have to be a theologian to know that.
Yeah.
You can be of any age to do that.
Right.
You don't even have to grow up around religion to know
Absolutely.
what hurts you and how what you're doing is hurting or helping other people.
Exactly. And it's the summary of the whole thing.
It's a
Like
summary of the
Jesus
whole
said,
thing.
it's the summary of everything. And then you hear the Dalai Lama say, my religion is kindness.
There you go. Yep.
You know,
There you go.
and you're seeing it again. It's this transcending truth that's coming out about all of the religions. You can paint it this or that and put it in this or that box, but they're all saying the same thing.
Yeah. And maybe you've seen that meme, that graphic, infographic that shows all the world's religions at one point or another in each of the books say something like, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you.
Right.
Everybody's saying that. So we all kind of know that in that way. And so anyway, yeah, we need to be understanding of each other, forgiving. And, you can get through life just knowing how to be kind to people.
Absolutely.
You can have all these words, but if you don't have love, you're going to be as clanging brass.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's Paul in the New Testament,
Yeah.
once again.
And then of the disciples that were very simple and unlearned, and Paul and whoever else, he said was unlearned, but they knew that they had been with Christ. I mean, that characteristic is the kindness that he's shown.
Exactly.
And our judgment is not going to be based on, how much information did you acquire per se, though the Bible does say get knowledge and get understanding.
Yeah.
But it's going to be based on, like, how did you treat each other, the least of these?
Yep.
For the same judgment and measurement you use will be measured and judged against you. So
Yeah.
Anyway, that's what it boils down to. So there's no excuses. There's no legalistic church rule that justifies your prejudiced behavior against another person, no matter how they got themselves into that position or how you feel about it or whatever. So
Yeah.
love one another. So anyway, next week, we're going to be talking a bit about the world's religious movements and how we can find Christ in all of them. And if you're serious about your spiritual journey, then you should be ready and willing to get into everything to find the answer. So, Spiritual Realities has a new site. You can go to spiritualrealities.net. Spiritualrealities.net,
Yeah.
plural realities. Follow us on Facebook. That's Facebook /Spiritual Realities. We still have newprecept.com. Put your questions, comments, concerns. If you have any show ideas or things you want to see discussed more fully, let us know. Email me at robert@newprecept.com. That's robert@newprecept.com. And follow us on Spotify, iTunes, and Facebook Live.
You can see more of the work that I'm doing in the world at 3dayflight.com. And my wife and I have a restaurant in Memphis called Imagine Vegan Cafe, imaginevegancafe.com.
See you next time.
KWAM, your news and information station with CBS News updates every hour on the hour. KWAM Memphis.